Today, I'm going to give you an instant reaction to the Evan Mathis card trimming altering podcast interview that he did with Sports Card Nonsense. It was a really good chat, as always, with Mike and Jesse. They are the hosts. They did a fantastic job giving Evan every opportunity for him to speak his mind freely on why he thinks, card trimming is okay, and his thoughts on the wider, card grading and card community in general around the thoughts of this topic. Now, if you're not sure who Evan Mathis is, he's a former professional footballer, or NFL player, I should say, for the Philadelphia Eagles. He basically won a Super Bowl with them as well, I think, and he's always been a card collector. Now, in the last week or so, he put out a video that showed some pretty advanced techniques on how to go about trimming cards. We spoke about it on this channel. Pretty, alarming stuff. And what was really interesting about this, and that I talked to in that last video, is that Evan has had allegations around card trimming, I think dating back to 2019 or even earlier than that. So the whole video seemed a bit strange for him to put it out there. And one of the things I talked to at the time was maybe he was recently banned by PSA. So this was sort of his way of trying to leave egg on their face by coming out and saying, this is how you trim, guys, do this stuff because PSA can't detect it. And that's essentially the gist of what he was saying. But he alluded to a few things in the podcast, in the interview, that indicated he's been banned for quite some time. So again, it raises question as to why he's coming out now. Now I'm going to share my thoughts a little bit more on that in a second, but very quickly, this is Sports Card Nonsense. This is them on Instagram, so check it out if you haven't seen the interview. It goes about 40 minutes. I listened to it on Spotify, so if you haven't seen it, check it out, then come back to me, because the talking points won't make sense unless you've heard it. And all in all, I thought it was a really good chat, and they talked to a bunch of different things. Now, I'm not going to summarize everything because their platform deserves you going to them and having a listen for yourself. But essentially, to give you some cliff notes, he talked through many different things. And like I just alluded to, I had a suspicion that PSA had recently banned him. And like I just touched on, that wasn't the case, because he sort of alluded to very quickly that he had been banned prior to Nat coming in. And when Nat came in, he basically reached back out to say, can you please unban me so I can start submitting again? I deserve a second chance. Now, that's pretty laughable in my opinion, because when you're doing something like card trimming, you've got evidence for being banned, at least according to PSA. This is their opinion. I find it hard to believe you want to give somebody a second chance. So I'm all for PSA in that specific instance. But he essentially crapped on PSA for quite a lot within this interview. He talked to how they've got systemic issues with regards to not being able to detect cards that are altered or trimmed. And he talked to the fact that the literal first card that they graded, which is that Honus Wagner, is a known trim card, which I believe is the one that's associated with Bill Mastro. And he talked to all these things around why PSA sucks and they can't detect it at all. He also highlighted a few things around how, he submitted cards, they flagged it as being trimmed. He took those same cards, gave it to somebody else, and then they were, graded, or at least that's what he alluded to once again. He also talked to how the vast majority of valuable cards that are graded by PSA, and I also assume some of these other grading companies, have also been likely trimmed. And this is where he started, or he already started to get pushed back, but this is where Mike and Jesse, stepped in a little bit more, because they talked to how he's okay with this. Why is he okay, getting away with it, and then basically having, a poor customer end up with a card? And he basically, as in Evan, puts all the blame really on the third-party grader, in that they've missed it, they can't detect it, so therefore it's okay, because he's basically doing a good thing for that card. By him, altering or trimming it, he's pushing the price of that card up. Now, those are his words, not mine, if you check out, the interview, but I found that, pretty alarming, because you can't really, just wash your hands like that. It's freaking crazy. He also, touched on how for modern cards, it's even harder for them to detect it. And he thinks that there are more than likely a lot more modern cards out there, as in the low value modern cards, being trimmed to get good grades that people don't really know about, which again is, pretty scary and, like I said, pretty laughable. One other interesting point that I think he made was he talked to, SGC being the most consistent grader at the moment. That raised some eyebrows for me, because initially when I heard him say that, my mind went to, okay, are you doing this with SGC? That's why you're talking them up, because you're hoping people might start paying a premium for SGC? Or is it also the fact, as Sports Card Radio reminded us once again today, SGC's founder has accusations around card trimming in the past, and the allegations around, some people in the hobby learning from that certain individual. Now, those are allegations. That's not my opinion or anything like that. That's just what people are saying. But that's just a curious thing for him to say. Now, I know people also joked around him maybe having CTE, which is why he made the video. I don't think that's the case at all. Evan came across quite well-spoken, sounded very intelligent. I just don't know how you can sort of wash your hands clean the way he tried to do in that interview. Now, if you heard it, please, let me know down in the comments below. But there's a few more things that I think really needed to be talked to that, in the moment, Mike and Jesse maybe didn't think of or didn't get an opportunity to try and dig a bit deeper on there. But if Evan, wants to have a chat, I'm more than happy to have him as my first guest, my first hosting opportunity on my channel to interview someone, because I don't think we can shy away from the fact that the, end consumer is still getting an overinflated card, because he's talking about it from the perspective that, I'm buying, this card and then I'm trimming it, right? And then it's getting a better value because I'm helping people with, a higher value card. But it doesn't discount the fact that once it gets in the hands of the end consumer, right, and they then find out that it's trimmed, or it becomes common knowledge within the market that that card is trimmed, that card loses value. So it's not okay to say, you're doing a good thing by them, but reality, the market's going to care, which is why it's not being disclosed when you sell it to the individual. Now, these are the questions I'm talking to right now, so you can just see we touched on the first one. The card loses value basically the second you do that. And I'm putting these questions out to him because I would love for him to either answer it on a stream or, just via DMs that I can share in an upcoming video. He also, talk to some of the issues at the third-party graders. I would love to talk to him far more on that, because I talk all the time. I work in external audit, policies, procedures, control environments, internal policies, all this kind of stuff is my bread and butter. I love assessing them. I love thinking through, where the issues are within those processes and where the things are that could go wrong, and, what can we put in place to try and fix them. So given that he's so in the know on how to bypass some of these things at these graders, or at least he alludes to being like that, what does he think that these graders could be doing better to try and fix their processes? Is that something he wants to disclose? Is that something he actually wants them to fix? Because, from my perspective, these third-party graders have dropped the ball just as much as these card trimmers have, because the fact they can't detect these things, because it's pretty obvious that they can't do that for the most part, given the amount that have slipped through the cracks, they need to be held just as accountable. And that also goes to the third question that you can see on screen, right? Where I'm talking about how these trimmers seem to really easily absolve themselves of the risk, of the guilt of selling somebody, a card that's been trimmed or altered. And it doesn't make any sense to me to do that when you sell the card, right? And you can't feel good about it purely because you're saying, well, I'm getting the card and pushing the value up for you as an individual. It's like, no, not really, because the second, like I touched on with the first question, the second this information becomes public knowledge, that card is likely to go down in value. And, the reason why we place a higher value on, high-end cards and sort of high-grade cards that are vintage and things like that is because the QC process was incredibly poor back then. And Evan does talk to this, right? The QC process was incredibly poor. So the fact that something has come out perfect and it's managed to last in, the next 70 years, if we're talking about a 52 mantle, it's lasted the 70 years, got into today, still unscathed, no markings, it looks perfect, it gets graded, that's sort of, a holy grail in some sense, right? And it stood the test of time and it's managed to stay perfect, right? That's why people want to pay the premium for it, because it's literally, lasted the 70 years and it's managed to come through and still look as beautiful as it did the day from the factory, right? That's why people want to pay that premium, because it tells that story. The second you sort of take a card that was either too big or too small, or you apply some chemicals to it, or you try and do some trimming or color restoration to try and make it look like it's the same sort of card that lasted the test of time, you've done something wrong there, and people don't want to, pay a premium for that, and you're taking advantage of them by doing that. You not disclosing it to the buyer is done so for a reason. I know you as a trimmer, as an individual trying to make money off this, might not see a problem with it, but think about the poor person that's buying this card. Now, I know also that a lot of these guys buying them are very high net worth individuals, so it's sort of like monopoly money for them in some cases, but there are people out there that, buy a Grail card because it takes them back to their childhood, and they might not have all the money in the world, but they want to get this one thing, right? And then now they've bought this thing, and it comes out that it's trimmed, and then their investment or their Holy Grail piece in their collection is now worthless, right? To some extent. You can't just, then also talk to how, like it touches on in the video, how that person should have done better in that situation. They needed to buy the card, not the holder. Like I get that there's also a responsibility on the buyer. When you're buying something, you need to be more aware of what it is you're buying. You need to be somewhat educated. But if you're talking to the point where things can be trimmed to the point where it's very hard to notice, and only, people that are trimmers or that detailed can spot it, like that's not okay. Just because it's that hard to spot doesn't make it okay, in my opinion. So I'd be really keen to sort of chat with him. Not sure if he'd be willing to be honest. I'm not sure my face is so washed up, so I do apologize. But it'd be a really good discussion point to have, because there's a lot more to talk to on that, right? This kind of mindset from him was really insane, in my opinion, because he seemed to be so comfortable. And obviously he's comfortable because he's been doing it, or allegedly doing it, for a long period of time. And he sort of talks to cards that he's trimmed in the past. Like, how can you get that comfortable with what it is that you're trying to do? I would have much preferred him to have come out and said, like, yeah, I know it's wrong. I'm just happy to do it because I don't think it's wrong, right? I don't care about the end buyer if they get screwed over. Not go for the perspective that he had and said, well, they need to do better. The third parties need to do better. But you can't say the third parties suck for missing this, and then you can't also say the buyer sucks for missing it if you are taking advantage of that mindset, right? Because that's when deception comes into play, in my opinion, as we talk to, in the last few videos. So it is what it is. Let me know your thoughts on the whole interview. I thought it was, very interesting. I'm sure there's more that I wanted to talk to, but I got caught up on a couple of the points. So again, I do apologize. Let me quickly see if there was anything I missed. I don't think so. It's just a very strange interview. And I also think that, to some extent, he's looking to take PSA down in some capacity. Now, not sure why that is. I initially thought at the very start of the video, like I said, that it's because he was recently banned. Doesn't look like that is the case. I think Bill Mastro talked to this in an interview, actually, when he talked about the whole Honus Wagner being trimmed, and he talked to it as being like a rush, a thrill, a dopamine hit that these people were doing to try and bypass these graders because it got too exciting for them. So because this guy can't grade anymore, and he thinks he can't do it through group submitters, because he also did mention that he thinks that it's too easy to spot through group submitters, which I don't buy. But is this his dopamine hit now? Is him trying to sort of muddy the whole card grading industry a dopamine hit for him to try and get back at Nat Turner for not unbanning him? The other point in that was, again, like I said at the very start, really strange. He shit on PSA, but then said he wants to still grade with PSA. He wants him to unban him. It's like, make up your mind, bro. What is it you want to try and do? So, Evan, good on you for having the chat. You didn't need to do that. Good on you for putting the video out there, because again, whilst I think it's, disgusting that people can sort of see this and then mimic what you're trying to do, at least you've made it a talking point for people to be aware of what the things are that they should be trying to spot. I don't agree with it in any way, shape or form, but I would love to have you on to chat, to understand, a bit further on some of those talking points that I raised. I'm a very, logical dude. I'm not somebody that hates. I'm going to give you every opportunity you want to try and talk to things. I'm not going to judge you while we're having the discussion. I'll openly disagree with you, obviously, but I'm not going to, shut you down or try and force you down my narrative. We'd have a discussion, open, honest discussion like men, and then, go from there. So to everyone that did watch the video today, I hope you liked it. Let me know your thoughts if I missed anything from the interview or you saw anything else that was super interesting. I know this one was very long, so again, I do apologize. I just sometimes talk. There's a lot of thought process and things going through my mind right now that I wanted to get off my chest and talk through on this one, because, it's pretty freaking crazy in my opinion. So thanks for watching, and I will, see you in the next one. Cheers.